Hey everybody, this is Jason Ostrowski, and welcome to another episode of the Everything Real Estate Podcast. Today's conversation is all about knowing your worth and showing it. This episode is titled Give Value, Receive Your Worth, and we're diving into one of the most important parts of our business, which is the listing appointment. As agents, our ability to communicate value directly impacts not only the service we provide, but also the compensation that we earn. And when it comes to standing firm on what you're worth, nobody does it better than today's guest, Scott Sheppard, team leader of the Scott Sheppard team out of our Fox & Roach Vineland office. With 24 years in the business, Scott is an associate broker, a former appraiser, and a consistent top producer year after year. He brings experience, confidence, and a clear value proposition to every client conversation. And today, Scott's here to help us do the same. I'm really excited to have him on the podcast today. So let's get right into the conversation this week with my guest, Scott Sheppard. Joining me today is Scott Sheppard, team leader of the Scott Sheppard team out of our Vineland office. Scott, thanks for joining me today. How's it going on your end?
Doing great, Jason. Appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Well, I know you're a very busy man, and I'm glad that we can make this happen on relatively short notice. And the first thing I noticed is that we were just talking about before we got on about our glasses, but I noticed that you and I are dressed like two Johnny Cashes today. We're like
right.
Twins, all black, glasses going. So apparently we both got the memo before we hopped on here today. So
absolutely.
So I'm excited to have you on the podcast, and the reason why is our topic today is going to be give value, receive your worth. And from our brief conversation together last week, you are definitely doing a great job of defining your worth with your clients. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about that with you today. So with all that said, we're not going to be throwing around specific commission numbers on this episode. As we all know by now, all real estate commissions and fees are negotiable. But in my humble opinion, some agents make a much better case of defining their worth in this market. And Scott, you do a great job of making that clear with your people. So with that said, Scott, are you ready to get into this podcast with me?
I'm very ready. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, first question to you, and I think a very poignant question because we're talking about value. What does providing value mean to you as a real estate professional when you're on a listing appointment with a seller talking about your approach to selling their home?
Yeah, I mean, that's a broad question, but a very good question. And I think, what comes to mind for me is, of course, being a trusted advisor, using my experience all my experience and all my ups and all my downs, to best serve my client. I think the main thing is I really try to do it with like some skill, some strategy and detail so that we can provide the best service to our clients and while keeping our clients' best interest in mind.
These things take time to happen, right? Your value proposition to your clientele is a product of an amalgamation of doing this X amount of times over X amount of years.
Correct.
And we were talking about agents on our teams, and I have a new agent. I love her. She's great. She comes from a nursing background, and she was pretty high up on the food chain as far as nurses go. And she got into real estate, and she always says to me, she's like, this is so much harder than I thought.
I've heard that before as well.
Right?
Yes.
And so, it is a product of that experience that you bring to the market. And so I wanted to start with that question from 36,000 feet. We're going to kind of zone in here. All too often, my next question to you, all too often, agents are so quick to discount themselves before showing what they actually bring to the table, right? A lot of agents head into a listing appointment prepared to just give away the store.
Yes.
And we have to approach it just like an offer on the table. How are we going to negotiate what we're doing, right?
Right. That's right.
And so knowing this, Does that affect your approach in any way when you head out to a listing appointment, knowing that other agents are doing this?
Right. Not really. You know, I basically, I mean, of course there's discount brokers, but it really never affects my approach. I only know one way to do things, and that's the right way and all out. And that's kind of my mindset when I go out there. There's always going to be discount brokers. There's always going to be someone that'll do it cheaper. I really don't, and you know, we do face that. There's no question. But if we go out there prepared, like super prepared, and know their home better than they do, it's typically not a problem. But ultimately, you know, I approach it the same way.
I like to personally tell my clients when we first sit down, I will flat out tell them, because I feel like it's a matter of transparency, and it's also disarming in many ways to tell them I'm flat out not going to be the cheapest option.
Correct.
They're just flat out, because like you said, there's always discount brokerages around. They've been around forever. You know, some will charge a flat nominal fee just to put it on the MLS. I mean, we all know who those brokerages are.
Yes.
We were never them, and we're never going to be them, right? And so you have to stand by your value. Again, if you can't prove your value to the seller, that's really what it comes down to.
That's right.
Choose you, right? Why are they choose you? So, you know, with all commissions, like I had mentioned before, being negotiable, how do you best handle the conversation around compensation with your seller and not be afraid to stand firm on your fee? Now, again, this may come down to experience,
right?
But Scott, what are you leaning on when you stand firm with your clients?
Yeah, I mean, you know, again, like you mentioned, my experience. You know, I've been been in business for 24 years. You know, and I think, you know, of course, we always face those objections, those commission objections. But I think it's important, and you know, in thinking about that, you know, I kind of lead with value, not with my fee. And if you lead with what you do for a seller, a buyer, and really spend the quality time with them, you know, so that they truly understand what we do as real estate professionals, the commission, the fee issue is going to come up, and, you know, that's generally handled. And I can tell you, you know, most of the time, you know, I'm a big lister. My sellers have no issue paying me, you know, my fair share of the commission after I show them my value and how I conduct myself and how I go about my business.
I think that's the key to everything, is that, you know, your approach many times when you are showing them and being transparent with them, showing them exactly what you're going to do and defining it in clear terms.
Yes.
Many times sellers don't even ask you necessarily what your fee is, right?
That's right.
You want them to be like, where do I sign?
Correct.
Without even thinking about it.
Exactly.
You know, if I can ask you, because this I think sticks in agents' minds a lot when they go out, because navigating the conversation about commission, people get lost in their heads a lot of time.
Yeah, sure.
Many times the question comes up, you know, from a seller, can you match another agent's fee?
Right.
What do you say in those circumstances? Because I know we all get it, you know.
Right.
So what do you say in those circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, you know, if a seller asks me that for the very first question, it's probably not a seller that I'm going to want to do business with. You know, and it's funny because I tell my team all the time, I'm interviewing them just like they're interviewing me. Okay. And you know, if that is the first question and the most important question, and maybe we're not made for each other, and that's fine. And I've walked away from, you know, from many, not many, but some listings when you know, we are married for a while. So I have walked away if I don't think we're going to get along. And obviously, you know, I know my worth, and I know, you know, what I bring to the table. And, you know, it is my job to let our clients know, you know, what that is. But it's funny, you know, I always remember this comeback, you know, like one of the best comebacks that I ever heard. And I must have been at a seminar or something, and I heard it. And it was like, you know, how do you expect me, like if you say to a seller, how do you expect me to protect your price if I can't even protect my commission? Right?
Yeah.
So if you say that to a seller, I have seen many blank stares from a seller because they're processing that. But in this market, Jason, it's easy to get your price, right? Because it's strong. But I've been doing it 24 years. I was there in 2008, 9, and 10 when it was a buyer's market. And price is so critical, and knowledge and strategy and all those things are so critical. And, you really have to work to get that price. So, I just think you have to put it in perspective to the seller and let them understand I don't want to say a pushover, but I'm not just going to give up my fee when I know what I bring to the table.
And I can tell right away, like, Scott, you're already kind of speaking my language here because, we want to be, or at least I want to be. I mean, everybody has, the analogy that they can use, but I always like to use the Nordstrom analogy.
Yes.
Yes. Like, I'm Nordstrom. I'm not going to be Walmart.
Correct.
And so, you can go to Walmart if you want to. That's your prerogative.
Yes.
But like you had said, you can't be afraid to walk away because you know your value. And you had mentioned those lean years.
Yes.
I got into the market in, I think like mid 2007.
Okay.
So I felt like I brought the bad market with me.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
Here I am.
Oh, yes.
A new age, and all of a sudden everything just completely evaporates.
Yes.
In the span of about a year from when I started.
Absolutely.
And you learn really quickly how important a good real estate agent is and what their worth is and what my worth is, right?
That's right.
Through those situations. And I think that many agents just say to themselves, I need this listing. Well, do you?
Right. Exactly.
What is it going to do for you?
Right.
And like you said, if you're hearing that question right off the bat from a seller, that's usually a major red flag.
Sure is.
Because they're just looking for, they think all realtors are the same.
Right.
And they just want somebody that's going to do it the cheapest. And that's not going to be us. So, all right. So with all that said, what are some specific, I want to get into some specific strategies with you because we talk, around, the value, right? Yeah. What are some specific services or strategies you include that elevate your perceived value with sellers in this market?
Yeah, I mean, the way I think I'm a little different in this sense that, as I mentioned, Jason, I'm a big lister. For one, to answer your question, I ask for a pre-approval for every showing. Not every appointment. I ask for a pre-approval. And a lot of realtors don't like that. They take it personal and they think that I'm doing that. And they're insulted by that. But what they really don't understand is I'm doing it because I run it like a business. Because if my seller asks me who's in the house today, I can say it's Joe Smith. He's an FHA buyer for $250,000. Putting 3.5% down with Annie Mac Bank. I think that's knowing your business and handling your business. Plus, there are maybe the property I've listed won't. There might be an FHA issue that I need to know about, ahead of time. So knowing who's going, my sellers love knowing who is going through their home. Furthermore, I accompany every showing. Okay, I'm not saying every time if the home's vacant, my seller's okay with that's fine. But I'm going to tell you, 98% of the time, 100% of the time I have a pre-approval. 98% of the time I'm on the showing. So my sellers love that. And of course, when I'm competing, it's good because I'll say, ask them if they're going to put a lockbox on your house and their house is full of stuff and they don't want it. I said, look, I'm going to be here I pre-approve them. I'm on every showing. I'm going to be here. I'm going to lock it up and I'm going to give you immediate feedback, good, bad, or indifferent. They love it.
That's a great pitch.
Yeah.
Scott, I'm not moving anytime soon, but gonna come ask you to list my property. You had mentioned about showing up for the showing. So
Yes.
There was a now, since retired agent in my office that when I started, she was the icon of icons in her office. She was almost one of those characters larger than life.
Yes.
Shout out to Louise Scarlett, one of the best that's ever done it. She used to show up to every single showing.
Yep.
That was her reputation.
Right.
Whether agents liked it or not.
Sure. That's right.
She was going to be there. And she advocated very strongly for each and every client that she had. And I will always remember that about her,
Definitely. And Jason, you mentioned value, but like that is providing value. My seller, they love the fact that I'm there, that I'm answering questions. If I don't know the question, I ask the seller to answer the question. I have sold properties by being on the showings. Is it hard work? Extremely hard work. But very rarely does someone say I didn't earn my commission.
You know what else, Scott? She was one of the, just like yourself, she always got her fee.
Right.
That was Louise.
That's right.
That's what it was, and that's what it's going to be. And if you didn't want to do that, then you weren't working with Louise. Bottom line.
Love it.
Did very well for herself. So again, we can't be scared, or frightened to stick by our guns and have, be resolute about, again, our worth, our value. So what role does transparency and education play in building trust with your clients and justifying your professional fee? Because it sounds like, Scott, right off the bat, like your clients trust you, just like my clients trust me.
Yes.
So what role does that transparency and education play in what you do?
Yeah, I think it's extremely important. It's like you always want to sharpen your tools, right? So I think it's important. Myself and my team, we're listening to Rajiv's AI Mastermind every week. If our county board we deal with a lot of septics down here. Every year they have a septic seminar. What are the new, how is the health department going to, handle these new laws or regulations? And I think, educating myself and my team to have that local knowledge is extremely important. With Berkshire Hathaway, I mean, there's so much stuff that seminars and training and all those things. And, it's so important that we educate ourselves so that we can be the best that we can be. And I you mentioned transparency. I just think that comes out, on a listing appointment when you have that knowledge behind you.
You had said something earlier in the conversation that kind of stuck with me, and that was knowing the property better than the seller knows their own house, right?
Exactly.
And I think that if that's your mindset, then you're always going to be successful. Because if you know the houses, the local market, you said you're keeping up to speed on what's trending in the marketplace, what's relevant right now in terms of marketing, or what's going on in your townships, your boroughs, your cities, and knowing that so you can speak intelligently with all your clients, and that builds the trust with your clients.
Yes,
the bottom line.
Absolutely. I mean, I was lucky enough before I came to Berkshire Hathaway to have two brokers. One was a private broker, and an appraiser. And I actually worked and got my appraiser's license, but that told me that, and I don't carry that, but what an education it gave me. It told me how to be prepared, how to know that listing better than they do. So you can answer, questions, with education. And I had two brokers that always challenged me. I had to show them my listing package before they would sign the listing. So I knew I had to be prepared. How did I price it? Oh, are you going to pre-test the septic? What's the CO requirements? All those things have to be thought of in advance. And it kind of trained me to do that.
That sounds like a trial by fire by me.
Without a doubt.
That sounds fantastic. And the appraisal side of things.
Yeah.
So what an advantage when it comes to pricing to be able to say, hey, I took my appraisal courses. I'm an appraiser,
Right. That's right.
we don't need to go to an appraiser. I am an appraiser. I know how to price your property, right?
That's right. Absolutely.
And I mean, what a card to play, So, can you share a specific time when you earned a higher commission rate because the client clearly saw your value? Does something stick out to you in your career where you could say, "Hey, this happened, and I did earn that higher commission"?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind was early on in my career. There was a commercial property in Vineland, New Jersey, and did an extreme amount of work to, without saying the type of business, there was a going concern on a piece of land, and it was generating income, and therefore, the price of the property ended up being, $1.2 million that we were going to list it for. And the owner of the property was a very successful businessman who, I'm not going to name names, but who understood, the value of hard work. He made it through hard work. And I showed him, I spent an incredible amount of time, going to the assessor, going to zoning. What uses can we do? What's the highest and best use of this property? What, the income that this business is generating, what value can we put on this? And through many conversations, we came up with a value of $1.2 million. So I got him on the phone and he said, that's great. It's kind of what I was thinking of. And, I see all the hard work that you put in and I would like to list with you. And I said, terrific. And without saying his name, I said, but look, what I want to emphasize is that my commission rate's 10%. And he said, no problem. God bless you if you can do it. That was his exact response. And we did it. So we earned 10% on $1.2 million. It was the biggest commission I ever earned. It's a little bit funny story. We're sitting at the title company and you're at the time you're looking down at the HUD and the title officer goes, "Oh, wow." And he turns to him and he said, why did you list with Scott? And, this is a lesson to everybody out there. He said, because he asked me to. That's what he said. He said, because he asked me to. So you have to change your mindset, know your worth, and just ask. Just ask.
I should have led with that question because that's the podcast right there in a nutshell.
Yep.
And, one lesson that I learned along those lines, similarly to what you're saying here, is that if you've ever been a part of an auction with a buyer, that auction company charges a quote unquote premium.
Yes.
That basically is, their fee. And it's outrageous.
It is. And,
it is what it is, right? They get it because they asked for it.
Right.
And similar to what you just said, sometimes we're just afraid to ask.
We are.
I had another agent that was a mentee of mine, and he would go out to listing appointments, and he would ask for, a pretty strong fee. And I said, why are you doing that? He said, because I can.
Right.
And I think sometimes, when you're inexperienced like that, you don't know any better. You just do it.
Yes.
You don't think about it. You just do it.
Right. Because that's the way it's always been done.
And he was getting it. And so why not? Right.
Right.
So,
absolutely.
Anyway. All right. So what tools or systems have helped you consistently deliver a high level of services that clients recognize and are willing to pay for?
Yeah. I mean, as I mentioned before, you want to think there's a big secret out there, but, I think it's important being in a company like Berkshire Hathaway or Fox and Roach and a national company, as we're privy to just about every tool imaginable, whether it's KV Core or whether, there's marketing, there's trading and all those things. I don't know if it's so much tools, but I think the main thing is everything is pre-planned and well thought out. So, ahead of time. So that, when we list a property, my team knows, what happens when we list a property. Go down the list. Boom, boom, boom. You don't have to ask me. Post it out to social media. Turn it into the OA here. Every little detail is spelled out. What do you do when the house gets under contract? Right? Kristen on my team sets up inspections, goes right down the list. What happens when a home closes? You just go right down the list. So I created my own system, and there's no secret, but it's just that you have to be disciplined enough to follow that, because I think my clients see that I'm a professional, that my team does take a systematic approach to every listing or every buyer that we deal with. Now, of course, we have embraced AI a little bit. That is definitely a game changer. Listening to Rajiv every week, and I have used some different strategies that have definitely helped my business, and I do think that is a game changer, and is something that agents definitely want to pay attention to.
I love to bring, one new wrinkle. I love to bring a 30-day AI marketing plan with me. Right. Property. I think like you had talked about being organized step by step. You can literally show a client like, hey, here's a 30-day AI marketing plan.
Exactly.
You may not use every single tool or strategy here, but it shows that you're on the cutting edge and you are willing to do, let's say 20 out of the 30 of these, you're willing to do 20 of them for the site.
Absolutely.
Through the list, what's important to you?
Yes. Yeah. And I should mention that we do that. Like, when I go on a listing, I call it a seller's checklist, right? Social security number, date of birth, all the things I need for their deed. I ask them about, have they had a termite, problem, septic, well, copy of your deed, copy of your tax bill, copy of your survey. And then, from the marketing side, we do print out, it is a 30-day list to let them know that we are systematic about it. And this is what we do to help sell your home. So I think that was a great point you brought up.
If you're going to be a top dollar agent, you have to provide top dollar value. And I think you're spelling it out step by step.
Yes.
Very transparent way, very easily digestible way.
Yes.
And very systematic. You had mentioned that. I think that's really, really important, because when you're an agent like yourself, you're going out to a lot of listing appointments.
Right.
And you need to know that listing appointment, that it's in your head, right? We all have our process and what we go through. But, once you have it down, when you really have it down,
right,
you feel, confident enough that you're going to beat any other agent in that situation.
Right.
And I love that feeling. I love going out there saying, I'm just going to blow these people away.
Exactly. Right.
And I love when they actually are like, wow, that was better than the last agent we had out.
Yeah. You mentioned tools and things like that. And I want to say there's a big secret here, but I compete against people that have a lot of technology, and that's what they go about. But, when I talk about pre-approvals, when I talk about being on every showing, when I talk about immediate feedback, when I talk about working in their best interests, that they love it. And that it's very simple, but it works. And they know we're going to market the heck out of their property as well.
It's working with me right now, Scott.
Yeah.
Like I told you before. So, all right. So what's your best advice, if we can finish up? What's your best advice for agents who want to elevate their perceived value and have a more confident, compliant conversation about compensation with their potential clients?
Yeah, maybe leaning on what I just said. There is no secret here, right? There really is no secret here. I show up at the office, every day, put that hat on and go to work. But I think for agents out there, there's no secret. You just have to change your mindset, understand that this is your livelihood here. You have to know your worth and show your worth, say what you do and, do what you say. And you do that, I promise you'll win more listings.
That is great advice from somebody who's been doing it for a long time and has been very successful in this business. And so, Scott, I want to thank you for coming on, but I do have one more question to you.
Sure.
So now you're not aware of this question, of course. And so I'm going to ask you, since you were an appraiser before you ever got into real estate, did you ever have a dream that you were appraising a property and another version of yourself showed up as a real estate agent to give yourself comps?
No.
So, all right. So let me ask you this: like, would you be annoyed that agents showed up to give you comps?
Not at all. I mean, look, you got to take your ego out of the equation. It's not about ego. It's about getting it right for the client. You know, at the end of the day, that did happen to me, and I encourage that, and I do that. And you know, the appraisers that really know their value, they're happy to listen and talk about it. And believe me, that has helped me get value sometimes when it's close. Trust me. Because maybe they're not aware of something, or maybe I got a comp from an assessor that they're not going to take the time to do, right? So it's important to be engaged. But yes, I was on the other side, and I'm always willing to listen.
Got to be a very unique point of view for you.
Yeah. Right, it is.
And like I said, it's nothing but a plus or a check mark on your resume to have that background in what we do. So
yes,
Scott, it was a pleasure talking to you today. Wish you nothing but success continued this year, next year, and into the future. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Jason. It was great being here, and best of luck to you as well.
That was our conversation with Scott Sheppard this week. Not much to add, except that I want to say that the perfect encapsulation of this episode is the example that Scott gave about early in his career asking for a certain commission amount from a potential seller that he thought that he had earned, and he wasn't afraid to ask for X percent. And I think that's the perfect example, if you go back and listen to this episode again, the perfect example and template for all of us to follow. Because number one, Scott had the confidence to ask for that. He believed in what he was worth and his value. And on the flip side, his seller said he gave it to him because he asked for it. And I think we can't be afraid to go into a listing appointment, stick to our guns, and ask for what we think we are worth. Whatever that number is, whatever that value is, we can't be afraid to ask for what we're worth. And so I'm just going to leave it there, and I hope all of you will think about that the next time that you go out on a listing appointment. Well, that's it for the podcast this week. We will be back in another couple of weeks with a new topic, a new guest, and as always, if you want to hear something that we haven't covered yet on the podcast, reach out to me at jason.ostrowski@foxroach.com. And if you haven't liked and subscribed to our podcast or left us a review yet, please do so. It helps us to reach more people. Once again, this is Jason Ostrowski saying stay safe out there, stay selling, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Everything Real Estate Podcast.